Good evening and welcome to Fantasy Formula One Podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and I am putting the audio straight into my camera now instead of putting it through my mixer, so I'm going to be messing with it just a little bit. Let's try it there. We'll see how that goes. And today we're going to be continuing with our driver bios for the 2023 season, looking ahead to 2024, and we're going to be discussing Lewis Hamilton, number 44, driving for Mercedes. And Lewis Hamilton's a multiple world champion winner. I don't really need, if you're playing fantasy Formula One, just know that he was the 6-7 time world champion driving for Mercedes. And then like a couple years ago, back when I first started getting into fantasy Formula One, Max Verstappen was he was the young guy who was trying to make a name for himself. Like, the two Red Bull cars actually crashed into each other at one point, and it wasn't pretty, right? But when first year I got into this, the 2020 season, that was the year that Max Verstappen almost won, or maybe he barely eked it out. I forget, but he was the underdog, and I rooted for him. But now he's been on top. Yeah, he would have won. He barely won. Now he's been on top for 3 seasons, and now he's all dominant. And Lewis Hamilton's trying to figure it out to get the car back to it, because the car just hasn't been what he's been looking for. They haven't been meshing really well, and so that's a little bit of the history. So when you think Lewis Hamilton, think like this guy is. He is fully capable of winning the entire thing, and his value and his performance represent that. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Where to go? Cool. So for Bahrain, right now, keep in mind, like, he's been at the end of the 2022 season. Again, if my memory serves, maybe it was a 2021, but I think it was a 2022. No, it was 2022. It was 2021. Sorry, I believe it was the end of 2021 season that literally the race ended. The world championship was decided with basically a drag race between Red Bull and Mercedes with Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. So that is the caliber that this guy can be. Not necessarily reflected this season, but that is the caliber he can be. So kicking out with Bahrain, qualified 7th, finished 5th with 19 points, as to be expected. We expected a lot from him. In Saudi Arabia, qualified 8th, finished 5th with 16 points. In Austria, qualified 3rd, finished 2nd with 29 points. In Azerbaijan, qualified 5th, finished 6th with 19 points. And then in Miami, qualified 13th, finished 6th. But you notice he's creeping down, right? Qualified, finished, still finishing better than he qualified, but creeping down a little bit. 24 fantasy points, but only 8 championship points. Italy was canceled. In Monaco, qualified 6th, finished 4th for 28 points. In Spain, qualified 5th, finished 2nd for 39 points. And in Canada, qualified 4th, finished 3rd for 23 points. In Austria, qualified 5th, finished 8th for 31 points. In round 11 in Great Britain, qualified 7th, finished 3rd, 25 points. In Hungary, qualified 1st, finished 4th. And this was where, for me at least, it became blatantly evident that the race pace just wasn't there for Mercedes this year, because Russell qualified 18th and finished 6th. And then Lewis Hamilton qualified 1st, which is great. The one-lap pace, wonderful. But then he couldn't stick in the top 3. And you'll see that trend going. So you got 20 points there. In Belgium, round 13, qualified 4th, finished 4th. Again, off the podium, but did very, very well for 32 points. In round 14, qualified 13th, finished 6th. Again, right there, just out of the top. It's solid in the top 10, but just out of that top 3 range, right, for 29 points, excuse me. In round 15 in Italy, qualified 8th, finished 6th for 17 points. In Singapore, that was the race that Max Verstappen did very, very poorly in. Lewis Hamilton qualified 5th, finished 3rd, got on the podium, 39 points. In round 17 in Japan, qualified 7th, finished 5th for 20 points. In round 18 in Qatar, qualified 3rd, and he crashed out. 0 laps, DNF. So he crashed into Carlos Sainz, and And this is, again, an example, if you've listened to the other podcasts, one of the things I'm working for 2024 is to try and figure out some way to take into the fantasy Formula One calculus what happens when a driver crashes or gets a DNF or whatever because of what happens on the first lap, specifically the first straightaway into the first turn, because that's where this happened. And it was just him, Lewis Hamilton, being ultra aggressive, laid on the brakes, turned in, and Carlos Sainz occupied it. They both crashed out, and he ended up taking, giving the mea culpa and take responsibility for it. But how much do we hold that again? Especially Carlos Sainz. It wasn't his fault. He was just racing his race, and Lewis Hamilton tried to occupy the same spot of track as he did. And Lewis Hamilton, again, he was being really aggressive. It was the first lap, the first turn. He really wanted it. He was still somewhat of a contender for, moving up in the points. He was still trying to take Sergio Perez's second spot away from him. So why wouldn't he try it, right? So I don't know. So for 2024, I'm working on trying to figure out how to make it, basically put a little asterisk, be like, yes, he got a DNF, but it wasn't a true, hey, I just crashed out, Anyway, United States, round 19, qualified second, finished second for, so he qualified second, finished second, but he got -4 points. And the reason why, again, this is another thing that should be an asterisk, right? So him and who else? It happened to him, and it happened to, I think it was Leclerc. Yeah, him and Leclerc both got disqualified after the race. So Leclerc finished third and Lewis Hamilton finished second, but then they both got randomly inspected, and there's a piece of wood on the bottom of the cars, and that is designed, when you see the cars driving down the track and throwing sparks, is because there's so much downforce on it that it actually will pull the car into contact with the street or with the track. So they put this piece of wood there to make sure that first off, they decrease the chance of damaging the aerodynamics on the bottom of the car, but also because as soon as they're putting too much downforce on, and they're basically just like dragging the car across the track too much, they measure that wood, or it's like fake wood or whatever it is, and if they rub too much, it means they were pushing the too much of a downforce, and they get disqualified for it. Very rarely does that happen. They don't test the whole field. They just randomly test a couple people. Well, it turns out the people they randomly tested were number 2, number 3, Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, and they both had excessive wear on it, and they were both disqualified after the race. And Texas is a very high downforce track, and it's got some terrain features on it, and there's lots of scraping, and it was talked about by the announcers. It was talked about by everybody, and people believe, the standard belief in this race was that that more drivers, since everybody was throwing sparks the whole time, more drivers would have had it if they had been randomly tested, but only 2 cars were randomly tested. It was them, and that was it. So again, do we as fantasy Formula One managers, do we hold that against Lewis Hamilton and be like, well, he had a DNF, so I don't know if because he did everything right. He finished second. He should have gotten all the points. So as far as me as a manager knows, I think he did everything right. I don't know. He just happened to get a little too much downforce on it. I don't know. So that's something I'm working out for 2024. Round number 20 Mexico, qualified 19th, finished second. Boom, 41 points for Lewis Hamilton. In Brazil, qualified 7th, finished 8th. 13th. 13 points. In Las Vegas, qualified 11, finished 7. He was just trying to make it around that track. I think he was pushing, but Vegas, there was a few drivers, and a lot of drivers that you're just like, man, I don't know what's going on. I thought half the field was going to crash out, and they didn't. Only 3 people did. Got 26 points in Las Vegas, and then Abu Dhabi, qualified 5, finished 9. But at that point, you can't really blame that performance on him. He got 14 points, but he was already out of the hunt for Sergio Perez's spot. And so let's go ahead and take a look at his season stats. Raced all 22 races, had 122 passes, so he passed about 5.5 people a race, which seems to be pretty average for some of the drivers. He had 6 podiums, so roughly 30% of the time he was on the podium. Finished the season in the top 10, 20 of the 22 races, so 90% he was finishing in the top 10 again, which is great, is exactly what you're looking for. He had one DNF. Again, it was his fault, but it was turn one, lap one. So what do? He had the fastest lap award 4 times, and so his end of year cost was $25 million. Okay, so he started out. I guess I probably didn't mention that. So he started out at $23.7 million, ended at $25 million. Now, part of that was because he's a former world champion. The other part of it's because he's Mercedes, but it also is because he put up a lot of very good points, right? So he finished the season with 506 fantasy points and a 0.91 points per million. The only person who got better points than him were the person who came in second and the person who came in first in the overall championship. So he was the third best, and we're going to start seeing a trend with him and Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen and these higher up drivers that they're going for 25-30 million. So if you want somebody like a former world champion, or you want somebody like a Mercedes that can get 500 points and be in the top 10 90% of the time, you're going to be paying a pretty penny for it. And for him, you're paying a quarter of your whole operating budget if you want him on your roster. But and again, I think he would be absolutely worth it. But Max Verstappen, and we'll get to him here soon, but Max Verstappen was just so over the moon dominant that you get Max Verstappen for 30 million and he got twice the points that Lewis Hamilton did for 25. You just can't. So Max kind of broke the mold for this 2023 year, but like Lewis Hamilton was very, very worth it. But as soon as you have Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen on a team, that's half your budget, and you still have to get 3 more drivers and 2 more constructors. So a lot of times, at least for this year, as soon as you had Max Verstappen, which you needed to be competitive, you couldn't afford Lewis Hamilton or George Russell for that matter. So a lot of times, since you had to put the money into Red Bull, you just put less money into Mercedes because you just couldn't afford it. Because as soon as you had Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and George Russell in it, then that would have been like 75% of your total bankroll. Well, that's it for Lewis Hamilton. I'm expecting he is fully capable of winning the entire thing next year. And little tidbit, heard on the I think it was the Beyond the Grid podcast, that over the off season Lewis Hamilton is actually going to Mercedes factory and personally overseeing some construction of some parts because he was not happy with the way the evolution went for the car this year. So great things. Keep your eyes open because you could very, very, very easily see Lewis Hamilton back on top and win the whole thing in 2024. Well, I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Cheers.